The shotgun blast echoed through the cornfields like God's own thunder. But it was just Old Man Hargrove firing a warning at the coyotes, or so he claimed. Lewis froze mid-stride on the cracked sidewalk of Elmwood's main drag, his heart slamming against his ribs harder than the recoil must have kicked that bastard's shoulder. "Faggots out walkin' again," Hargrove spat from his porch, the words slinging like buckshot, and in that split second, Lewis wondered if the next round was meant for him. He'd come back to this dust-choked speck of Kansas after 3 years in New York, chasing dreams that turned out to be just shadows on Broadway's alley walls. The prodigal son, they whispered, but not the kind with a fatted calf waiting. More like a lamb led to slaughter. Lewis wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, tasting salt and regret, and kept walking toward the community theater, the one place in town that still felt like sanctuary. But even there, the cross on the steeple next door loomed like a noose, reminding him. In Elmwood, love like his was the original sin. Garrett's truck rumbled up beside him then, gravel crunching under tires worn thin from hauling hay bales and hauling ass away from family dinners that dragged on like confessions. "Get in, Lou," he called through the open window, voice rough as the wheat fields they both grew up knee-deep in. Lewis hesitated, eyes flicking to Hargrove's silhouette still hunched over his rifle, then climbed in without a word. The cab smelled of leather and last night's whiskey, a cocktail that always made Lewis's stomach twist with want and warning. Garrett didn't look at him, just gunned the engine and peeled out, leaving the old man's curses fading in the rearview like bad radio static. File 1. They didn't speak until the truck hit the outskirts, where the billboards for Jesus Saves flanked the highway like judgmental billboards at a drive-in. Garrett's knuckles whitened on the wheel, his jaw set like it was carved from the same flinty soil that birthed them both. "Heard you got the lead in that play," he finally grunted, eyes fixed on the endless ribbon of blacktop unspooling ahead. Lewis leaned back against the worn bench seat, the springs creaking under him like they were protesting the weight of unspoken truths. "Yeah. Angels in America. Fitting, huh? All that talk of prophets and plagues." He forced a laugh, but it came out brittle, cracking like the parched earth after a summer drought. The play was Millicent Harper's pet project, the town's self-appointed arts patron with her pearls and her progressive pretensions, but even she had raised an eyebrow when Lewis auditioned. "It's bold," she'd said, her smile tight as a corset. Bold in Elmwood meant anything that strayed from the Sunday sermon script. Garrett shot him a sideways glance, blue eyes sharp under the brim of his faded Royals cap. At 28, he was all broad shoulders and calloused hands, the kind of man who could fix a tractor blindfolded or throw a punch that'd drop a steer. They'd been boys together once, fishing in Willow Creek, stealing smokes behind the grain silo, whispering secrets under the stars that felt infinite back then. But secrets have a way of curdling, especially when one boy's gaze lingered a beat too long on the curve of another's neck. Garrett had bolted for the family farm straight out of high school, married Jenny Wilcox in a shotgun wedding that smelled more of obligation than bliss, and buried whatever flickered between them under layers of flannel and fatherhood. Now, with Jenny gone, cancer quick and cruel as a Kansas twister, Garrett was a widower at 28, rattling around that big old farmhouse like a ghost in his own life. "You think the town's ready for that kind of bold?" Garrett asked, his voice low, laced with something that wasn't quite doubt. Worry, maybe, or fear. The kind that keeps a man up at night, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, wondering if he's damned for the dreams that sneak in uninvited. Lewis shrugged, tracing the frayed seam of his jeans with a thumbnail. "They called me a sin long before I stepped foot on any stage. What's one more act?" He meant it as a joke, but the truth hung heavy between them, thicker than the humid air pressing in through the cracked window. Elmwood wasn't San Francisco. It was the Bible Belt's frayed hem, where rainbow flags burned brighter in effigy than in pride. Lewis had learned that the hard way at 16, when Pastor Hale caught him kissing Tommy Reeves behind the bleachers. Tommy denied it all, of course, blamed the beer, the heat, anything but the truth, and Lewis became the town cautionary tale. "That boy's headed for hellfire," they'd murmur in the diner, forks pausing mid-bite over plates of greasy hash. The truck slowed as they crested the hill overlooking the Harper farm, where the community theater squatted like a forgotten barn, its marquee flickering with half-hearted promises of escape. Garrett pulled over, killing the engine, and the silence rushed in like floodwater. He turned then, really turned, and Lewis felt the air shift, charged as a summer storm. "Lou," Garrett said, the nickname slipping out soft, unguarded. "You don't gotta do this. Not here. Not now." Lewis met his gaze, those eyes that had haunted him across 3 states and 1,000 regrets. "And what? Hide forever? Pretend I'm someone else?" His voice cracked, betraying the ache that never quite healed. "I came back for this, Garrett. For the stage. For something real." He didn't say for you, but it echoed in the space between them anyway, loud as a confession booth's creak. Garrett reached out, hesitant, his hand hovering like it was afraid to land. When his fingers brushed Lewis's knee, it was electric, tentative, but there, a spark in the dry tinder of their history. "Just be careful," he murmured, thumb tracing a slow circle that sent heat pooling low in Lewis's gut. "Folks talk, and talk turns to action round here." They sat like that for what felt like hours, though the dashboard clock ticked only minutes, the world outside blurring into gold and green. Lewis wanted to lean in, to close the gap and taste the salt of Garrett's skin, but he pulled back instead, ever the coward in his own skin. "Rehearsal's waiting," he said, voice steady as he could manage. "Drop me off." Garrett nodded, starting the engine with a rumble that vibrated through them both. As they pulled away, Lewis glanced back at the theater, its windows glowing like eyes watching, waiting for the boy they called Sin to bare his soul. Little did he know, the real performance hadn't even begun. Rehearsals were a battlefield disguised as camaraderie. Millicent fluttered about like a hen in pearls, clucking directions and dispensing herbal tea laced with unsolicited wisdom. "Darling, channel that inner fire. Let it burn, but not consume," she'd trill, while the rest of the cast, mostly transplants like Doc Ellis's niece from Wichita, nodded along, stealing glances at Lewis like he was a live wire. He threw himself into the role of Prior Walter, the prophet with AIDS in a world that deemed him unclean, his voice rising in the dim auditorium until it filled every crevice, every skeptical heart. But outside those walls, Elmwood closed ranks. Whispers followed him to the Piggly Wiggly, where Mrs. Klein refused his coupons with a pursed-lipped TSK. "Can't serve the devil's own," she'd hiss, and Lewis would leave his cart abandoned, apples rolling like accusations across the linoleum. At the gas station, kids he'd babysat once upon a time now crossed the street, their father's lessons etched in fearful eyes. And always, Pastor Hale's shadow loomed largest, from the pulpit, thundering about Sodom's fall, his sermons timed suspiciously to rehearsal nights. Garrett showed up unannounced one evening, leaning against the theater doorframe with a six-pack dangling from one hand and shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Brought reinforcements," he said, holding up the beer with a half-grin that didn't reach his eyes. The cast eyed him warily, a straight-arrow farmer in their den of thespians, but Lewis waved him in, heart tripping over itself. They cracked cans in the green room, the fizz cutting through the post-rehearsal haze. Garrett perched on a folding chair too small for his frame, listening as Lewis recounted the day's lines, his passion spilling out like wine from an overturned glass. "It's not just a play," Lewis said, pacing the cramped space, script clutched like a talisman. "It's redemption. For guys like me. Like us." The us hung there, bold and uncharted. Garrett's gaze darkened, beer forgotten in his lap. "Us." He stood, closing the distance in 2 strides, the air thickening with the scent of hops and hay. "Lou, you know what that word costs here." "I know what silence costs." Lewis shot back, chin lifting in defiance. "It eats you alive, Garrett. From the inside out." For a heartbeat, they were 16 again. Stolen glances by the creek, hands brushing in the dark. Then Garrett's mouth was on his, rough and desperate, tasting of regret and revelation. Lewis melted into it, fingers tangling in Garrett's shirt, pulling him closer until the world narrowed to the heat between them. It was messy, urgent. A collision of pent-up longing that left them both gasping, foreheads pressed together in the aftermath. "We can't," Garrett whispered, even as his arms tightened around Lewis's waist. "Not like this. Not with the town watching." But they did. Stolen moments in the truck bed under star-pricked skies, whispers in the farmhouse loft while Garrett's son, little Ethan, slept downstairs. It was fragile as spun glass, this thing blooming between them. Romance wrapped in risk, love laced with the lash of judgment. Lewis felt alive for the first time since New York, his lines sharper, his heart fuller. Garrett softened too, his laughter freer, his touches lingering like promises. Yet the storm clouds gathered. Pastor Hale cornered Garrett after services one Sunday, Bible in hand like a gavel. "The boy's poison, son, corrupting everything he touches. You lost Jenny to the Reaper. Don't lose your soul to sodomy." Garrett brushed it off, jaw clenched. But the seed was planted, doubt's first insidious root. And then came the betrayal's first whisper. Tommy Reeves, back in town on a parole stretch, slinking into the diner with eyes like a snake's. He spotted Lewis across the room, nursing coffee and a script, and slid into the booth uninvited. "Miss me, pretty boy?" Tommy leered, voice oily as the fry grease. Lewis stiffened, memories flooding back, bruised lips, broken trust. "What do you want, Tommy?" "Just a chat. Heard you're stirring up trouble with that fag play." Tommy leaned in, breath sour. "Folks say you're after the farmer now. Garrett, right? Careful, he's got a kid to think of. Wouldn't want Ethan catchin' what you got." Lewis shoved him away, chair scraping loud enough to turn heads. "Get out." But Tommy's laugh followed him into the street, a harbinger of fractures to come. That night, as Lewis lay tangled in Garrett's sheets, the phone buzzed on the nightstand. Garrett reached for it, then froze, screen glow illuminating his face in stark relief. It was Jenny's sister, voice shrill through the speaker. "What the hell are you doing with him, Garrett?" "Ethan's asking questions. The whole family's talking." The call ended with a click, but the damage lingered, a chasm widening beneath them. Lewis pretended not to hear, curling closer, but sleep evaded him. Outside, thunder rumbled distant, promising rain or reckoning. The weeks blurred into a fever dream of rehearsals and rendezvous. Each day a tightrope walk between ecstasy and exposure. Lewis threw himself into the play with a fervor that bordered on frenzy, his portrayal of Prior Walter evolving from mimicry to revelation. On stage, he wasn't the town pariah. He was a prophet, flawed and fierce, demanding the world reckon with his existence. "We will be citizens," he'd declare to the empty seats, voice echoing off the rafters. And for those stolen hours, Elmwood's venom felt distant, diluted. Offstage, though, the poison seeped in slow. Anonymous notes appeared in his mailbox. Bible verses scrawled in block letters, warnings of hellfire and brimstone. One morning, he found a dead crow on his doorstep, wings splayed like a crude star, eyes glassy accusations. He didn't tell Garrett. What good would it do? Instead, he burned the bird in a coffee can behind the rental cottage, watching flames lick feathers black, whispering prayers to a god who'd long since turned his back. Garrett, meanwhile, withdrew into the farm's rhythms. Dawn patrols of fence lines, evenings wrestling Ethan into baths and bedtime stories. The boy, all of 5 with Jenny's curls and Garrett's stubborn chin, sensed the shift. "Where's Uncle Lou?" he'd ask at supper, fork poking at peas like they held secrets. Garrett would ruffle his hair, force a smile. "Busy with his show, buddy. He'll come round soon." But soon stretched thin, and the loft trysts dwindled to hurried kisses in the truck at midnight, Garrett's hands trembling as they roamed. One evening, after a grueling rehearsal where Millicent had praised his raw vulnerability, Lewis drove out to the farm unannounced, craving the anchor of Garrett's arms. The porch light spilled yellow across the yard, moths dancing in frantic spirals. Ethan answered the door in dinosaur pajamas, eyes lighting up. "Uncle Lou, Daddy's in the barn fixin' the tractor." "Wanna see the kittens?" Lewis scooped him up, burying his face in the boy's neck to hide the sting of tears. God, how he loved this kid. The uncomplicated joy of him, untouched by the town's taint. They tromped to the barn, where Garrett emerged from under the hood, grease-streaked and scowling until he saw them. "Hey, Sprout," he said to Ethan, then softer to Lewis. "Didn't expect you. Missed you," Lewis admitted, setting Ethan down to chase fireflies. The air hummed with crickets, heavy with unsaid words. Garrett wiped his hands on a rag, stepping close enough that Lewis could smell motor oil and earth. "Missed you too." Garrett's voice was gravel, his hand brushing Lewis's in the shadows. A ghost of touch. But when Lewis leaned in for more, Garrett pulled back, eyes darting to the house. "Not here." Ethan's got ears like a fox. The rejection landed like a slap, though Lewis knew it wasn't meant that way. When then? When safe enough, Garrett? When the whole damn town forgets we're breathing. Garrett's face hardened, the lines around his mouth deepening. "You think this is easy? Jenny's barely cold in the ground. And now? Now what?" Lewis's voice rose, sharp as a whip. "Now you're alive? Feeling something real for once." He regretted it instantly, the hurt flashing in Garrett's eyes like lightning on the horizon. "I'm thinking of my son," Garrett hissed low and fierce. "You waltz back in, all fire and fancy, expecting me to upend everything. But this ain't New York, Lou. This is home. My home." The words carved deep, exposing the rift Lewis had ignored. The city boy versus the soil-bound man, dreams clashing with duty. He turned away, throat tight. "Your home or your cage?" Ethan's giggle cut through the tension, the boy waving a jar of blinking lights. "Look, Daddy. Magic." Garrett knelt, scooping him up with a tenderness that twisted Lewis's gut. "Yeah, buddy. Magic." But as he met Lewis's gaze over the boy's shoulder, there was no magic there, just exhaustion and a flicker of fear. Tommy Reeves struck next, slithering back into the underbelly of Elmwood like a bad habit. Lewis spotted him at the feed store, loading bags into a rusted pickup, his parole anklet glinting under cuffed jeans. Tommy caught his eye, smirking that same smirk that had haunted Lewis's nightmares. "Howdy, sinner. Town's buzzin', 'bout your little show. Pastor Hale's plannin' a counter-rally. Redeem Elmwood, or some shit. You star of that too." Lewis ignored him, hefting his own sack of birdseed. Ironic, he thought, feeding the very creatures that symbolized his curse. But Tommy wasn't done. "Heard you're sniffin' round Garrett. Careful, boy. Man's got baggage. And I got stories. 'Bout that night by the bleachers. Bet he'd love to hear how you begged for it." The bag slipped from Lewis's arms, seeds spilling like confetti at a funeral. "You touch him, you come near us, and You'll what?" "Pray me straight." Tommy laughed, climbing into his truck. "See you at the premiere, sweetheart. Front row." The threat lodged in Lewis's chest like buckshot, festering. He drove straight to Millicent's, spilling it over chamomile in her Victorian parlor, all lace doilies and faded glory. She listened, pearls twisting in her fingers, then sighed. "Darling, this town's a powder keg. But art's the match or the water if we wield it right. Your performance could change everything. Make them see you. See us." The word bolstered him a fragile shield. That night, alone in his cottage, Lewis penned a letter to Garrett, words pouring out like rain. "I know it's scary. I know the cost. But loving you? That's the only heaven I believe in. Stand with me?" He sealed it, left it in the mailbox at dawn, heart hammering as he drove away. Garrett's reply came not in ink, but in action. A bouquet of wildflowers on the theater steps, daisies and black-eyed Susans tied with twine. No note but the scent of fields they'd run through as kids. Lewis pressed them in his script, petals bruising pages with color and courage. Rehearsals intensified, the cast coalescing into a makeshift family. There was Becca, the chain-smoking set designer with tattoos of Frida Kahlo snaking up her arms, who slipped Lewis joints during breaks and stories of her own queer odysseys in Chicago. Doc Ellis's niece, young Lila, idolized him, quoting Kushner like scripture and braiding ribbons into his hair for luck. Even Millicent shed her flutter, directing with a steel born of her own hidden sorrows. A brother lost to the 80s plague, unspoken but ever-present. One humid afternoon, as they blocked the angel's descent, wires creaking, lights haloing Lewis in ethereal glow, Garrett slipped in back, cap pulled low. He watched from the shadows, arms crossed, but Lewis felt his presence like a spotlight, warming every line. When the scene broke, Garrett lingered, waiting until the others filed out. "Proud of you," he said simply, pulling Lewis into the wings for a kiss that tasted of apology and affirmation. "That letter got me thinking. Maybe we burn it all down. Start fresh." Lewis's breath hitched, hope blooming fierce. "Together." Garrett nodded, forehead to forehead. "Together." But betrayal brews in the quiet hours. Tommy, ever the serpent, had ears everywhere. That same night, he cornered Garrett at the barbershop, fresh from a confession with Pastor Hale. "Know your secret, farm boy?" Tommy drawled, clippers buzzing idle in his hand. "Lou's got a mouth on him. Begged me once, might beg you too. But think of Ethan. Think of Jenny watchin' from up there." Garrett's fist clenched, but he held back, storming out with blood roaring in his ears. He didn't go home. Instead, he drove to the church, pounding on Hale's door until the pastor appeared in his robe, cross gleaming. "What you done?" Garrett demanded, voice breaking. "Spreadin' lies 'bout me and Lou?" Hale's eyes narrowed, feigned innocence cracking. "Truth ain't lies, son. That boy's a temptation. Walk away, or lose everything." The words wormed in doubt's venom. By dawn, Garrett stood on Lewis's porch, face ashen. "We can't," he said, the words a gut punch. "Tommy told me. Everything. And the pastor, God, Lou, Ethan's future. The farm. I can't risk it." Lewis staggered back, world tilting. "It's lies, Garrett. All of it. I love you. Doesn't that count for something?" Garrett's eyes welled, but he turned away, truck keys jangling like chains. "Love ain't enough in Elmwood. Not for us." He drove off, leaving Lewis in the dust, heart shattered on the welcome mat. The premiere loomed 2 weeks away, a beacon or a bonfire depending on who struck the match. The fracture with Garrett carved a hollow in Lewis where words once lived. Rehearsals became survival, each line a lash he welcomed, the pain sharpening his edges. On stage, Prior Walter's anguish poured from him unfiltered. Monologues that left the cast hushed, tears tracking Millicent's rouged cheeks. "Brilliant," she'd whisper after, dabbing her eyes with a lace hanky. "But save some for opening night, dear. The world needs your fire." Offstage, Elmwood's siege tightened. Pastor Hale's Redeem Elmwood rallies drew crowds to the town square, megaphone blaring verses on abomination, flyers decrying the perversion play, littering windshields like autumn leaves. Tommy orchestrated from the shadows, his parole freedom a license to harass. Tires slashed on the cast's cars, graffiti scrawled on the theater door. Sodom burns. Lewis scrubbed it off himself one dawn, bleach stinging his hands, the acrid fumes mirroring the burn in his chest. He avoided the farmhouse, but Ethan sought him out, toddling up during a farmer's market run with sticky fingers clutching a dandelion bouquet. "For you, Uncle Lou. Daddy said you're sad." The boy's innocence pierced deeper than any slur, and Lewis knelt, hugging him fierce, inhaling the scent of crayons and creek mud. "Tell your daddy Uncle Lou says hi, okay? And that he's the bravest man I know." Ethan nodded solemnly, then scampered off, leaving Lewis adrift in a sea of stalls hawking pies and prejudice. Becca found him there, slinging an arm around his shoulders. "Heard about the cowboy. Want me to key his truck? Or just get shit-faced?" Lewis managed a ghost of a smile. "Both. Neither. God, Beck, I thought he was it. The one who'd stand." She lit a smoke, exhaling toward the sky. "They all think they will till the mob howls. But you're the storm." Lou ride it out. Her words lingered as he wandered home, detouring past the creek where it all began. Him and Garrett, 16 and fumbling, fireflies witnesses to first kisses. The water rushed indifferent now, carrying sticks and sorrows downstream. Lewis skipped a stone, watching ripples spread, and whispered to the current, "What if I drown?" Garrett, meanwhile, drowned in duty. The farm demanded endless. Baling hay till his back screamed, mending roofs against encroaching storms, tucking Ethan in with tales of Jenny's laughter to drown out the silence. But silence lied. Guilt gnawed, memories of Lewis's touch haunting like ghosts in the loft. Pastor Hale visited twice, Bible-thumping redemption. But it was Tommy's whispers that festered. Tales twisted of Lewis's promiscuity, painting him as predator, not partner. "He's using you," Tommy sneered over beers at the VFW hall, "to get back at me, at all of us." Garrett shoved him then, glass shattering on the scarred bar top. "Shut your lying mouth." But doubt clung, sticky as regret. He drove by Lewis's cottage nightly, truck idling in shadows, watching lights flicker like hope he couldn't claim. One night, he almost knocked, fist raised, heart pounding. But Hale's words echoed, "Lose everything." He drove on, to the empty bed that smelled faintly of Lewis's cologne, and wept into the pillow till dawn. The betrayal crested midweek, a Thursday thick with thunderheads. Millicent called an emergency cast meeting, her voice quavering over speakerphone. "The pastor's bought the whole damn run. Front row every night with his flock. Protests planned. Signs? Chance, maybe worse." The line crackled with fear, but Lewis felt a strange calm settle, resolve hardening like amber. That afternoon, Tommy ambushed him outside the diner, two burly cousins flanking like hyenas. "Time to quit, Fairy," Tommy snarled, shoving Lewis against the brick wall, the impact jarring his teeth. "Or we make the play go dark permanent." Lewis tasted blood, copper sharp on his tongue, but met Tommy's eyes unflinching. "Touch me again, and the whole town hears how you cried like a baby that night. Begged me to stay quiet." It was a bluff, half-truth at best. Their fumbling youth more confusion than conquest. But Tommy faltered, face purpling. "You lyin'. Try me." Lewis straightened, wiping his mouth, and walked away, legs steady as prayer. Inside, he ordered coffee to go, hands shaking only when the waitress turned away. Word spread fast in Elmwood, bruises bloom louder than bouquets. Becca patched him up in the green room, ice packed to his jaw, fury in her eyes. "We fight back. With art. Fuck their fists." Lila, ever the idealist, organized a counter-campaign. Rainbow ribbons on lampposts, chalk art on sidewalks quoting the play, "More Life." Even Doc Ellis threw in, his waiting room flyers touting "Art Heals Elmwood." But the real fracture came from within. Garrett, cornered by Hale at the co-op, seed bags forgotten at his feet. "You courtin' ruin, boy," the pastor intoned, finger jabbing like judgment. "That Walsh kid, he's the devil's instrument. Tommy says he's violent, seductive. End it, or I'll tell the boy protectors myself. Ethan's safety first." Garrett's world narrowed to that finger, Hale's voice a drone of damnation. Tommy's lies wove in exaggerated sins, painted Lewis as threat. "For the boy," Garrett muttered, echoing the mantra that had chained him since Jenny's death. He nodded, numb. "I'll handle it." That evening, he showed at the theater, cap in hands, face etched with apology. Lewis spotted him from the stage, mid-scene, and faltered. Line forgotten, heart seizing. The cast paused, sensing the shift, as Garrett climbed the aisle, stopping at the footlights. "We need to talk," he said, voice carrying clear. Lewis descended, script tumbling forgotten. "Now? Here. Private." Garrett glanced at the rapt faces, then led him to the lobby, double doors swinging shut like a guillotine. The air was stale, popcorn ghosts from last summer's fair. Garrett paced, boots scuffing faded carpet. "Saw your face. Tommy?" Lewis nodded, touching his swelling lip. "Nothing I can't handle." Garrett's eyes flashed. Rage, then remorse. "Should have been there. Protected you. Then be here now. Lewis stepped close, hand to Garrett's chest, feeling the thunder of his heart. "Stand with me. On stage, off, everywhere." Garrett covered his hand, holding it there, warmth seeping through flannel. "I want to. God, Lou, I do. But Hale, he knows. Threatens to go to social services, say I'm unfit. Ethan's all I got left of her. Of us. The us, Jenny's ghost, ever the barrier." Lewis pulled away, cold settling in his bones. "So that's it? Choose them or me?" "Not choose." Garrett's voice broke, pleading. "Just time. Let me fix this quiet. Talk to Hale. Set Tommy straight." "Quiet." Lewis laughed, bitter as bile. "That's what killed us last time. You're quiet." Garrett reached for him, but Lewis sidestepped, door handle cold under his palm. "The play opens in 10 days. Either you're in the seats cheering or you're out of my life. For good." He fled back to the stage, lights blinding, lines resuming like armor. But inside, the wound wept, betrayal's blade twisting deeper. Garrett stood frozen in the lobby, echoes of applause mocking his indecision, until he slipped away into the gathering dusk. The high holy days of dress rehearsal dawned humid, the auditorium sweltering as the cast sweated through cues. Lewis shone, ethereal in white linen, his prior a beacon of broken beauty. Millicent wept openly during the betrayal scene, Lewis's character renouncing his lover in a torrent of grief, and even the tech crew paused, hammers silent. Post-run, champagne corks popped in the green room, toasts to triumph. Becca slung an arm around Lewis, fizz bubbling on her lips. "You're magic, babe. They'll eat it up or choke." He smiled, hollow, scanning faces for one missing. Garrett hadn't come. No wildflowers, no truck in the lot. Just absence vast as the Kansas sky. That night, alone, Lewis cracked open a bottle of cheap bourbon, toasting the mirror's reflection. Bruised jaw fading, eyes hollowed by hurt. To sins, he murmured, glass clinking against glass. And the fools who name them. But dawn brought resolve. He rose, script in hand, and drove to the farm. Ethan answered, flour-dusted from pancake wars. "Uncle Lou, Daddy's in the field." Garrett emerged from the tractor, wiping sweat, surprise softening his scowl. Lou didn't expect this. Lewis thrust the script at him, open to the final act. "Read it. All of it. Then decide." Garrett took it, fingers brushing Lewis's, lingering. "Aye." For Ethan, Lewis cut in soft. "Show him love isn't a sin. That standing tall matters more than fitting in." Garrett nodded, throat working. "I'll read." Lewis drove away, hope a fragile ember. But in the rearview, he saw Garrett already turning pages, wind rifling like whispers of what might be. The eve of opening night crackled with electric dread, Elmwood's fault lines fracturing wide. Pastor Hale's flock swelled, caravans of pickups circling the town square, signs thrusting skyward. "Repent or perish, God hates fags." Tommy reveled in the chaos, his cousins patrolling like enforcers, ensuring no rainbow dared unfurl. The local paper, that spineless rag, ran a front-page editorial, art or anarchy, penned by Hale himself, decrying the play as moral terrorism. Millicent rallied the troops at final rehearsal, her pearls a necklace of nerves. "Darlings, this isn't just theater, it's testimony. We open the floodgates tonight. Let them wash over us." The cast nodded, faces painted fierce, but fear flickered in their eyes like stage fog. Lewis dressed in the wings, fingers steady as he buttoned Pryor's shirt, the fabric whispering against skin scarred by slurs. Becca adjusted his collar, her touch maternal. "Break a leg, prophet. And if they rush the stage, I've got the fire extinguisher modded for holy water." He chuckled, pulling her into a hug. "Love you, Beck." Then, scanning the gathering crowd visible through the lobby glass, Hale's horde massing, counter-protesters with Lila's chalked signs clashing in chants. His stomach nodded. "Where's Garrett?" The house lights dimmed, ushering the audience to seats in a hush broken by murmurs and muffled prayers. Lewis peeked from the curtain, heart stuttering. Front row, Hale flanked by deacons, Tommy smirking beside them like a jackal. Scattered throughout, familiar faces, Doc Ellis, the diner waitress who'd slipped him free pie, even old Hargrove, shotgun traded for a scowl. And in the back row, shadowed, Garrett, cap low, Ethan on his lap, script clutched in white-knuckled hand. Their eyes met across the abyss. Garrett's a plea. I'm here. Curtain rose on Act 1. Lewis stepping into the light, voice steady as he launched into Pryor's awakening. Now I am a prophet. The words hung, challenging, and the room held breath. Gasps rippled from the faithful as the AIDS diagnosis landed, raw and unrelenting. Tommy shifted, uncomfortable. Hale's jaw set like granite. Intermission brought storm. Protesters surged the lobby, signs waving, voices rising in a cacophony of condemnation. Close it down. Burn the script. Millicent met them head-on, pearls flashing. This is America, free speech, free hearts. Sit or leave, but don't you dare silence us. Doc Ellis backed her, locals murmuring support, a divide cracking open. Lewis watched from backstage, pulse thundering, as Garrett stood, Ethan tucked against him, and faced Tommy's glare. Enough, Garrett growled, loud enough to carry. Let the man speak. Tommy sneered. You gone soft, farmer? Defendin' the devil? Garrett's fist twitched, but he held, guiding Ethan back to seats. Defendin' what's right. Act 2 ignited the powder. Lewis's monologue soared. Betrayal's anguish, love's defiant bloom. His voice cracking the room's tension like thunder. When Pryor confronts his lover's abandonment, Lewis poured it all. Garrett's retreat, the hollow of loss. Tears gleamed on Becca's face upstage. Even Hale shifted, discomfort etching his brow. Then the angel descended. Wires humming, lights blinding, her proclamation a roar. We have abandoned the true faith. The cast encircled Lewis, a tableau of fractured humanity. And for a moment, the theater transcended Elmwood's bigotry, becoming a cathedral of raw truth. But climax brewed in the house. As the betrayal scene peaked, Pryor's lover, played by Lila's earnest understudy, crumbling under societal weight. Tommy bolted up, sign in hand. Blasphemy! He hurled at stage ward, with splintering against the proscenium. Chaos erupted. Shouts, a chair toppling, Hale rising with booming rebuke. Garrett surged forward. Ethan handed to Doc Ellis. Stop! His voice cut through farm-bred bellow. He reached the aisle's edge, facing the melee. This ain't faith, it's fear. Tommy whirled, fists flying. Traitor! The punch landed square on Garrett's jaw, blood blooming bright. Gasps rippled. Lewis froze midline, world narrowing to that crimson streak. But Garrett didn't fall. He straightened, wiping his mouth, eyes locked on Tommy's. Hit me again, and you hit every man who's ever loved quiet. But I'm done quiet. He turned to the stage, to Lewis, bruised lips mirroring his own, and called out, voice steady. Finish it, Lou. We're listenin'. The cast rallied, lines resuming tentative, then fierce. Lewis found his footing, channeling the violence into Pryor's rage. You can't imagine the humiliation. The room hushed, the brawl's echo fading under Art's insistence. Protesters sank back, some fleeing, others rooted. Hale among them, face ashen. Final act dawned redemptive. Lewis's prophet rising from ashes, demanding more life. Bring back the angels, he implored, arms wide. And the cast joined, voices weaving a tapestry of hope. Garrett watched, tears carving tracks through dust on his cheeks. Ethan clapping tiny hands. As the curtain fell, silence reigned, vast, pregnant. Then, a single clap. Doc Ellis, deliberate. Another from the waitress. Ripples spread, applause building to thunder. Feet stomped. Hargrove rose, grudging, joining the stand. Even stragglers from Hale's flock wavered. One deacon pulling the pastor up, murmuring, It's human, reverend. Tommy slunk out, tail between legs, but Hale remained, eyes on Lewis, bowing, spent, alive. The pastor's lips moved, no sound, but the nod was there. Concession, if not conversion. Backstage erupted hugs, cheers, champagne sprang like rain. Lewis searched the crush for Garrett, finding him in the wings, Ethan asleep on his shoulder. "You came," Lewis breathed, hand to Garrett's cheek, thumb tracing the swelling. "Couldn't not." Garrett leaned in, foreheads touching, world fading. "Read the script. Saw us in it. Messy, broken, but fightin'. I'm sorry, Lou. For the quiet. For everything. Forgiven." Lewis kissed him soft, mindful of eyes, but unashamed. "Stand with me now?" Garrett's arm tightened around Ethan, pulling Lewis in. "Always." The after-party spilled into the Harper farm, bonfire crackling under stars, locals mingling wary but willing. Millicent held court, toasting "The night Elmwood grew a heart." Lila danced with Becca, ribbons trailing. Doc Ellis swapped stories with Hargrove, who grumbled but listened. Hale approached as embers died, Bible tucked under arm like truce flag. "Mr. Walsh," he said, voice stripped of thunder. "Your words stirred something. My nephew in the city, he's like you. Silent, suffering. Maybe I misjudged." Lewis nodded, no gloat, just grace. "We all do, Pastor. But stories bridge it." Garrett watched from afar, Ethan dozing against him, pride swelling. This was America. Not the belt's buckle, but its beating heart. Flawed, fierce, forgiving. In the afterglow, Elmwood didn't transform overnight. No rainbow pavilions on Main Street, no sermons rewritten in pastel. But cracks widened into canyons, light seeping where shadows once ruled. The play ran 3 weeks, houses packed not just with protesters but pilgrims. Families from neighboring towns, curious souls seeking the spectacle that had humbled a preacher. Reviews trickled in from Wichita papers. A small town's big reckoning, hailing Lewis as Midwest's raw-voiced revelation. Tommy vanished soon after, parole violated in a bar brawl. Irony's justice, whispered over coffee at the diner, where Mrs. Klein now served Lewis with a tentative smile and extra creamer. "Heard it was a fine show," she'd mutter, averting eyes but not refusing his dollar. Garrett sold the back 40, easing the farm's yoke, and enrolled Ethan in art classes at the theater. Crayons over catechism, for now. Nights, they built something sturdy. Suppers with bedtime stories starring Uncle Lou the Brave. Lazy Sundays fishing the creek, hands entwined when no eyes watched, and sometimes when they did. Garrett's touch grew bolder, his laughter a balm. Lewis found home not in New York's glare, but here, in soil and soul. One crisp autumn eve, as leaves turned the fields to fire, they drove to the hill overlooking the theater. Same spot where doubt once idled the truck. Ethan romped nearby, chasing dusk's first stars, while Garrett spread a blanket, pulling Lewis down beside him. "Got something?" he said, fishing a small box from his jacket, velvet worn. Lewis's breath caught. "Garrett." Not rings. Too soon, too loaded but matching pendants. Silver, etched with wings, angel's promise. "For the prophets in us," Garrett murmured, clasping one around Lewis's neck, lips brushing the chain's cool link. "No more hidin'. We're out, Lou official." The kiss that followed was unhurried, sunset painting them gold, romance reclaimed, emotional tectonic shift. Ethan toddled back, plopping between, demanding stories. Lewis obliged, weaving tales of boys who loved fierce, towns that learned to stand. Pastor Hale's concession evolved quiet. A youth group session on Compassion's call, invitations to cast members for potlucks. No apologies but actions, his nephew visiting, tentative talks by the creek. Hale even attended closing night, front row sans sign, applauding longest when curtain fell. Millicent, ever the maven, parlayed the run into a touring fund, Becca directing a youth production. Angels abridged for awkward teens. Lila stayed, opening a coffee shop with chalkboard quotes. Doc Ellis hung a pride sticker in his window, subtle defiance. For Lewis, the stage lingered in blood and balm. Bruises faded, but the performance etched eternal. He taught workshops now, voice steady, drawing out Elmwood's hidden voices. A farmhand's stuttered coming out, a widow's whispered grief. Humanistic threads wove tight. Love not as sin, but salvation's spark. Winter blanketed the fields white, Christmas lights twinkling defiant in the square. Garrett proposed proper on New Year's, under mistletoe strung in the farmhouse hall. Ethan giggling as rings slipped on, simple gold band glinting. Marry me, Lou, make this forever. Yes? Louis breathed, pulling him close, Ethan's cheers the sweetest vow. The town buzzed. Some grumbles, but more toasts at the VFW. Hargrove even slapping Garrett's back. "'Bout time you smiled, son." Spring thawed the rifts further, wedding a modest affair in the theater. Aisle lined with wildflowers, cast as family, Hale officiating with amended vows. In diversity we find God's mosaic. Applause thundered as they kissed, Ethan scattering petals like confetti of consent. Years folded like script pages. Ethan grew, out and proud by prom, dating a boy from the debate club. Garrett's farm bloomed organic, co-op with Doc's niece. Louis directed, his Angels at annual rite, drawing crowds from coast to coast. But the heart of it pulsed in quiet moments. Hands clasped on porch swings, watching storms roll in, knowing they'd weathered worse. Betrayal's scar faded to silver, a reminder. Love demands standing, even when the world sits. In Elmwood's embrace, flawed and fierce, they stood, sins redeemed, performance eternal. They called him a sin once. Now, they called him home.